China versus America, who wins a deadly war in Asia? China and the United States will likely remain fixated on each other as potential military competitors for decades to come. But if relations are prudently managed, they won't have to become actual adversaries in a war. The two countries' respective capabilities, however, will play a role in how their global influence is perceived. Two superpowers eye each other uneasily across the Pacific, one well established after decades of Cold War conflict, the other a rising power eager to reclaim regional hegemony. Fortunately, despite profoundly different political systems, China and the United States are not as intrinsically hostile to each other as were the West and the Soviet Union. In fact, they have a high degree of economic interdependence. Still, history shows there is often a risk of war when a rising power challenges the ascendancy of an existing one. Beijing and Washington have profound, though fortunately not comprehensive, disagreements on matters of global governance. They have also reasons to mistrust each other. Fortunately, there are historical examples of rival superpowers coexisting most peacefully for long periods of time. For example, see the century in between the defeat of Napoleon and World War I, during which there was no European-wide war. Still, the balance of power between nations will likely play a role alongside diplomacy. A fleet that is never used in war may still prevent one, for example, by deterring possible opponents. China today has the largest military on the planet, with 2 million active personnel in the People's Liberation Army. However, China only spends slightly over one-third as much as the United States, accounting for 13% of annual global military spending in 2017 compared to 35% by the United States, according to SIPRI. Yet, the Chinese government is aware that the large size of its forces in part reflects an antiquated mid-20th century force structure emphasizing massive, low-quality ground armies. Starting in 2015, Chinese President Xi Jinping, who seems to remain in power indefinitely, announced a major reform initiative to radically downsize PLA ground forces to improve their quality. PLA ground and air forces still exhibit a wide range of quality, fielding both early Cold War systems and cutting-edge variants. For example, the PLA musters 8,000 tanks, but 3,000 are 1950s era Type 59 and Type 63 tanks. At the same time, the PLA also fields 500 Types 99 tanks, which are in a similar ballpark to a very capable US M1 Abrams. The PLA Air Force also has a similar issue. For instance, of its 1,700 aircrafts, roughly a third are dated J7 fighters, while another fourth include modern fourth-generation J10s and J11s, comparable to US F-15s and F-16s, and even a few fifth-generation stealth fighters. By contrast, the US military operates over 2,000 fourth-generation combat jets, increasingly being supplemented by fifth-generation stealth designs. These newer US planes theoretically enjoy a massive edge in long-range aerial combat and in penetrating enemy airspace. America's massive military spending reflects its technological-oriented approach to warfare, a paradigm which seeks to send a drone or a guided missile in place of a man or woman whenever possible, especially as everly friendly casualty may result in a political firestorm. Therefore, the Pentagon prefers to develop comprehensive intelligence and communication capabilities to direct a few weapons system with a high degree of precision. This is in contrast to fielding a larger and cheaper number of platforms, which was typical in the past, such as World War II. The paradigm favors networked warfare in which various weapon systems exchange sensor data. A ship, for example, may detect an attacking jet and pass the targeting data to a nearby fighter, which can use then the telemetry to launch a missile without exposing itself by turning on its radar, or vice versa. China is also an enthusiastic adopter of this doctrine and has arguably made great strides in developing armed drones, and advancing networking capabilities than Russia or various European countries. On the one hand, Chinese industry still lags notably behind in the development of technologies such as jet engines and suffers quality control issues. However, on the other hand, it's relatively strong in realm of electronics and is happy to copy both Western and Russian technologies. Furthermore, Chinese hackers have also proven reasonably adept at hacking into foreign computer systems and perpetrating industrial espionage, but Beijing has at least so far refrained from election manipulation tactics practiced by its neighbor Russia. Operationally, the PLA and US military have different needs. The US is geographically isolated from its foes and instead depends on a massive network of overseas bases on 6 continents to engage or contain adversaries. This requires globe-spanning logistical capabilities, includes hundreds of transport planes, aerial refueling tankers to keep jet fighters and transports afloat, and amphibious transports and carriers to convey marine jets and units. Just as importantly, strong diplomatic alliances are necessary to maintain those overseas bases and keep them supplied with fuel, personnel, and ammunitions. For example, US operations in Asia are heavily dependent on alliances with South Korea, Japan, Singapore, the Philippines, and more recently India. Several of these Asian countries, as well as Western and Central European countries, also rely upon US military forces to meet their security needs. China is only beginning to acquire such logistics and is situated in a very crowded neighborhood surrounded by potential military competitors such as India, Russia, and Japan. Personally, this author does not believe contemporary Japan will become an aggressive military power anytime soon, but China don't see it that way due to their bitter memories of Japanese invasion. Beijing has only a few military alliances with Pakistan, North Korea, and a few Southeast Asian nations, but China is now slowly developing multinational institutions such as Shanghai Cooperation Organization and its aspirational Silk Road project in hopes of fostering strong ties. However, China still retains tense relations with India, a country with a comparably huge population but only 1/4 of the gross domestic product, from which China seized Himalayan territory in a brief 1962 war. Moreover, Beijing has built up its force and road network on its border with India and also constructed a series of bases in nearby countries to envelop India. China is also expanding its capacities for long-range expeditionary operations befitting its status as superpower, particularly in Africa, where Chinese companies maintain a dominant and ever-growing presence. Beijing's non-interference and no questions asked approach to human rights and corruption issues have won it many friendly governments on the African continent. For example, Chinese troops have deployed as peacekeepers in Mali, where they have seen some action, and recently opened a naval base in Djibouti, just 6 miles to 7 miles across from a long-established American base there. PLA and People's Liberation Army, Navy, PLAN have also concentrated on training a special forces and marine branch suitable for more expeditionary operations. Despite all of this, the United States military still has vast more recent combat experience, particularly in joint operations, coordinating multiple services. The PLA's last major armed conflict was not very successful. Punitive invasion of Vietnam in 1979. Today, the PLA is only beginning to implement a more joint operations-oriented doctrine while struggling to overcome the traditional parochialism of the military hierarchy, which occupies a prestigious place in its society. The United States maintains more than 20 times the number of nuclear warheads that China does, 1,350 compared to 45 deployed and 4,000 compared to 270 when including stockpiles, according to Arms Control Association. This reflects Washington's more aggressive nuclear posture, which holds that the US has the right to launch a nuclear first strike in a conflict, even if it only has been attacked with conventional weapons. Moscow has a similar stance, claiming it may use tactical nuclear weapons to de-escalate a conventional